The best explanation is like I'm on the brink of losing control every single lap. That's where I'm going to be the fastest, is on the brink of losing control for 200 laps.
Wow.
Right. So having consistency every single lap. And that's something, sometimes I struggle with, sometimes like if I get a little out of control, I'm going to be reserved for the next 5 laps to gain that confidence back,
Sure.
and it's that ability to like snap back into it and go back out there and risk it all.
Welcome to UnNatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nic Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
What happens when innovation is constrained by design? In most industries, competitive advantage comes from building something better. In NASCAR, everyone is racing within nearly the same machine, under tightly controlled rules, forcing innovation into the margins, where milliseconds, psychology, teamwork, and strategic decision-making determine who wins. This conversation reveals how competition evolves when technology is standardized, why constraints often create creativity instead of eliminating it, and what every industry can learn from operating at the absolute limits of performance. CJ McLaughlin is a professional NASCAR driver and mechanical engineer competing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series and Arche Menard Series. Growing up in a blue-collar family in Massachusetts, he worked his way through the ranks of motorsports by combining talent, perseverance, and relentless fundraising to earn opportunities at the national level. Beyond racing, CJ brings an engineer's understanding of vehicle dynamics together with a driver's instinct for performance, offering a unique perspective on competition, innovation, sponsorship, leadership, and the future of motorsports. Let's go.
CJ, welcome to UnNatural Selection.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick.
It's great to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the world that you live in, which is completely foreign from mine, being in healthcare and life sciences and biotechnology and so on. So with that, one of the level setting question that I always start with kind of gives context to what you do, especially for people that are not familiar with your world. Could you please let us know in your own words what need or impact drives your work?
The need to go fast. I'm a adrenaline junkie by default. I was that way. The only thing I'm scared of is heights. That's the only thing that gets me. But like 200 miles an hour doesn't shake me. And there's a there's a need of going fast and then winning that ties in close to NASCAR. So those two things that just get my motor running, so to speak.
I love that. And for people who only see like the cars and the tracks for a few hours, can you give us a simple behind the scenes overview of what your organization actually does and what NASCAR industry actually is at its core? Like who are the real customers and what value is being created?
That's a loaded question. So throughout the course of the week, like once the season gets started, there's really no days off because once Daytona kicks off, you are getting ready. Once we leave Daytona, we're getting ready for the next track, the next track, the next track. There's no downtime really in the sport because you are prepping your next car, hopefully 3 weeks in advance. But sometimes the smaller, low budget teams are prepping that car the Sunday night that they get back from the racetrack. Um, in terms of like who the customer is at a race, it could be the general fan, it could be the sponsor of the race weekend or the sponsor's guests. Like sometimes I have sponsors and they bring their customers and the customer, their sponsors' customers, is what makes the sport go round. So it could be anywhere from the fans in the stands to corporate sponsors to the corporate sponsors' guests that are attending the race that weekend.
Yeah, and is that framework that you just described, has it been fairly stable as of the last 10 or 20 years? Has it been evolving as NASCAR has been evolving?
It's something been evolving. I think from the 2008 market crash to social media campaigns,
Mm.
where people are spending their dollars, what makes it authentic, and how sponsorships are structured have changed like completely. I think the focus is now more of a B2B focus in NASCAR rather than the business to consumer aspect of the people in the stands. NASCAR still is the most sponsor loyal sport in every, like when you see the M&M's car, you want to go buy M&M's or Monster Energy or Grill Mine Energy or whatever energy drink the race car you're cheering for is was going faster.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 highly influential, and you see little kids playing with the little cars and everything like that, right? So it's really a part of the culture and a part of society is in general.
Yeah, so that's what kinda got me hooked is, like, when I would go to the races with my dad, right? That was a fond memory of what me and my dad would do together, and so very fortunate to have those times and go to the races with him and experience that, and, like, there was definitely periods where, like, "I don't wanna do this, I wanna go do something else," but then you look back on it, like, it was the funnest times at the racetrack, just hearing Clark cows go by, and, there's something that, like, happens to you, like, physically that, like, when you see 40 cars with 800 horsepower whizzing by you at 200 miles an hour, it's like it's something that TV can't capture,
Yeah.
and that's what the toughest thing is you have to go to a racetrack to experience that firsthand.
Yeah, because it's not just a sound, you feel it.
Yeah, smell it, everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, the race gas that's, like, gets in your blood, and you're like, "Oh, wow." You just sniff that again.
Yeah, there's also that element of excitement coupled with fear. I think about bullfighting, and
Oh, yeah.
people are watching it, but in the back of your mind, there's always that sense like something could go wrong. This is not a fully safe and scripted environment. Things could completely go off the rails, if you will, and so there's always that element in the back of people's minds, right?
So our next race coming up is Daytona, and they always talk about the big one, which is the big wreck that collects 20 cars at a swipe. So sometimes if you're sitting 25th and all of a sudden you're driving 200 miles an hour, you can't slow down that fast. So you're crashing into a crash. You're on the brakes and you're trying to avoid the crash the best you can, but sometimes there's no avoiding it.
Yeah, I definitely want to get back into that, but actually, I want to take a step back and ask you something because you brought that up about being a kid with your dad. Um, Again, my background, I don't have much experience with NASCAR or motorsports, but I do have with tennis. And so, I grew up loving tennis, and there was a path towards becoming a professional no matter how distant it seemed. It's a lot of work, a lot of commitment, a lot of luck in many ways, and a lot of things that go into it. But I could kind of see that what that looked like, going to college and camps and all that stuff. What's the trajectory for a little kid that's like, I love NASCAR. I want to become a professional NASCAR driver?
Yeah. So like we talked about this with Formula One comparison to NASCAR and how much money it takes, right? So like my family, middle class through and through, right? We're all blue collar families. And what gave me the ability to make it to NASCAR was a sponsor to pay for my racing. And so, similar to Lewis Hamilton's story, where he had to go out and find the funding to bring to a race team, that's what I'm basically doing is going out finding companies to partner with to bring me into a seat in the car and give me the ability to go testing. Because as a NASCAR driver, living in a 1 bedroom apartment, just trying to make it, but it just comes down to funding and a little bit of luck, right?
Hmm.
So,
And
yeah, just saving every penny you have, and my dad kinda jokes around, not to make light of addiction, but, he goes, "I'm glad I got you addicted to racing because you have money for nothing else," you know?
um, it, and so there, but in order to get the funding, you've got to have like the training, the skills, right? You can't just be like, well, I drive my Volvo on the street and I'm going to go to NASCAR, right? So is there like a path? Like, is there a school you go to become a better NASCAR driver?
There are schools out there for road courses, for NASCAR, it's kind of like, I try to classify it as an adult league and junior league. You start out basically at go-karts, and then you move up to a series called Bandoleros, and then from there you go to a class called they're different classes, right? So the classic car would be the next step is legend car, which is essentially a motorcycle engine, for like a 4 foot, like a mini, like a go-kart on steroids.
Oh, wow.
And from there you progress up, and it just takes money and funding and I heard a joke recently, and they were like, "Man, what does it take to win in that series?" And, the guy goes, "Everything you have, because at every level of racing, it's everything you got.
For sure.
Every penny you got, it's everything you have."
How fast do those go karts with motorcycle engines go?
They go pretty full 110 at certain tracks, so they are ripping with no no protection around you, little to no protection. So
Wow.
that is the one of the funnest classes to be in, and it's so funny when I'm racing at the level I'm racing in, when I reflect with my friends that I would go racing with, man, those were the days, like, those are the funnest times we had because there wasn't much of a budget, I wasn't nervous about losing a sponsor. I wasn't really nervous about the race. I knew I was going to go out and win. And, you know, but at that point in time, I just want to make it NASCAR. And then you make it a NASCAR and you're like, oh man, I want to go back and race those legend cars again.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that sounds
kind of
like
comes full
fun.
circle.
Um, so now if we take a look at the industry itself and you zero in and kind of like innovation, this is really fascinating to me because uh, from what I've heard, there are such constraints on what you can and can't do with your vehicle and your engine and pretty much everything that goes into a race.
Yeah.
Can you tell us then what's your definition of innovation when it comes to NASCAR? What does it actually mean to you in the context of motorsports um and does it show up in real practical ways in your field?
Yeah. The biggest focus in NASCAR right now is aerodynamics and how we mount the bodies onto the roll cages. Um, Again, I'll mention a couple times what we call the highly funded teams and the lower funded teams, and you can equate that to Red Bull versus maybe a Williams in Formula One. For some of your listeners that may not be fluent in NASCAR, but you'll we had a test last year where the higher funded teams had about 200 more pounds of downforce in the middle of the corner, and downforce matters a lot for grip as opposed to a lower funded team. And they're just doing something different with how the air flows around their body and how they can get more downforce on their front tires, making more grip throughout the corner. Then when you go into the Cup Series, that's a whole another ballgame because they have such tight tolerances. Um, the way that their cars are manufactured, it's basically a kit car where you buy certain components from certain vendors and you can mount the body and you have certain tolerances from the X, Y, and Z axis. And that's how you can mount the body onto the chassis and how you can kind of twist and turn it, right? So they definitely try to play with that and push the boundaries as much as possibly they can. And with the innovation comes cheating. So like last year they caught someone, we got water bags inside a car and like one of the teams had poured like mercury and had a lead lined water bag just to get a little extra weight in the car.
Wow.
So that's how they innovate, right? Is the how
Yeah.
they can kind of push the limits of of cheating and yeah.
So weight is not a constraint. You can weigh as much as you want.
You want to weigh it as least as you possibly can, and they had that lead lined bag on the left side of the car so they could kind of place it where they wanted to and have that weight there.
Interesting, and it's
And so
amazing.
when so they can make weight when they go over the scales and they take that water bag out when they're racing, right?
Wow. Wow, yeah, and it's I don't know how much more weight that bag gave, but it's amazing just the
You might be
micro
taking 3 to 4 pounds, like
that's what I'm
that's
saying, yeah, like just the micro changes that affect the race so significantly, right?
yeah, for sure.
Um, so what are the kind of constraints that are put on innovation? Because I can understand the one side, right? So the constraints are important because a very well-funded team could go buy like a jet engine and put it in a car, right? And so it's like, well, you want to have some constraints, so it still becomes an apples to apples kind of a competition, but it obviously limits what you can do. So what does that look like when you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think the first constraint that was put on with NASCAR teams is the amount of wind tunnel testing they got, right? So bringing their car to a wind tunnel and figuring out how the air is flowing around the car. And then, that changed to cab models and everything and how, you know, they're doing um, they're building their computer models in the car for the car. And then the next constraint was having a setup vendor for where you're buying the car. So the teams used to manufacture their own car, right? And the smaller teams would have to buy cars from the bigger teams that would be able to manufacture cars. So that kind of even the playing field. But as far as innovation, like there hasn't been that much. So I know of like what teams would do to try to create more downforce is lower the tire pressures in the rears to get the rear diffuser down to create more downforce throughout the corner.
Hmm.
And it's really I think it's limited the engineers that have come into the sport because there's less innovation that's happening, right? They can do less. Um, like the bodies, when you see the old race car bodies that were twisted and they look all distorted, but they were perfect for rolling around a corner. And now you look at everyone, and it's kind of like everyone has the same car.
Yeah.
So that doesn't create um, that type of exciting racing that I think the fans are kind of yearning for.
And do some of those constraints become nullified over time? Like, for example, you mentioned the first one where the wind testing, right? But you can simulate some of that now in computers. So is that
Yeah,
really a constraint anymore?
for sure. Because someone at a bigger team, again, with the resources,
Mhm.
will hire more engineers to develop different models. And I'm talking like there's quite the stark difference between a higher tier team and a lower tier team. The lower tier team probably has, let's say, 10 to 15 people on the payroll, where a higher tier team has 300,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
Okay.
there's a stark difference between just manpower itself. So, looking at that aspect, yeah, there's they just have so many more people. Like more the more people they have. What's that saying where you can with enough people and time you can put a man on the moon?
Right. Um,
So
yeah, no, I mean, that's material. Going from 15 to 300, that's, that creates titles, right? It's a whole different playing field. And I'm sure that they're also pushing the boundaries across different fields. I mean, there's the car, there's also the driver. And that goes back to the other saying, which is like, is it the horse or is it the jockey, right? And so I'm sure that both play into this because you can't just put any schmo into a car and expect them to win. It takes, the discipline. It takes a certain amount of cognitive skill and reflexes, a physique, right, that fits within that constraints of the car.
yeah, and by no means am I coming on here bash NASCAR, but there's been some major changes in the sport within the last 5 years post COVID. So what they did during COVID is they eliminated practice. So what the bigger teams could do is they could laser scan the car with like creoform, the different types of roamer arms that they would use to measure every aspect of the car. Because no two cars are the same,
Yeah.
right? Like you can be pretty good with a tape measure, but that roamer arm is going to get to the third decimal place. So they take a roamer arm, they measure the car, they upload it into their software, and then you can go to the a manufacturer's simulator and drive your car on that track. From me being a driver on a lower tier team, I don't get that ability. So when I go to the track for the first time that weekend for my 30 minutes of practice, I'm out to lunch for the first 10 to 15 laps, where you get the higher tier guys who have been practicing all week and know that car. They can put down their fastest laps in the first 3 laps because they know how the car's gonna react as it hits the first corner.
Oh, wow. So they
So
constrain how much you can practice.
exactly. NASCAR does, and then which benefits the higher tier teams because they have their own simulators and their own alliances with these big manufacturers.
So that's flabbergasting. I could not have imagined that they limit how much you can practice. I can't imagine another sport where they.
Well, it goes back to, quote unquote cost savings, but it ends up costing some teams more because they have limited practice, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's so disproportionately favorable to the teams that can take practice off track and do it in other places.
Right. Right.
Wow. Um, yeah, that's a big one. I mean, back to my comparison with tennis, I'm thinking to myself like, if they put limitations on how much time I can spend on the court versus other people, it's just like I couldn't even imagine.
Right. And again, those bigger teams aren't renting out private facilities, but they're just doing it on a simulator where that's how they get to practice, right? I can use my home simulator, but the car again is going to drive differently, you
Sure.
know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And so then, when we think about, so obviously practice plays into the jockey, right, the driver. What are the kind of things that you as a driver or the field in general, looking at drivers, how the driver itself is changing over time? Is it like physique? Is it mental preparedness? Like, what are the kind of things that make for a good driver versus a great driver?
I think like what I've learned personally is the ability to stay calm and understand how many factors are outside of my control. One of the great drivers right now is Kyle Larson, and he's got a really laid back personality and how he interacts with the team, right? So you have in Formula One, you have a team principal. In NASCAR, we have a crew chief. The crew chief is responsible for the whole car, And him and his crew chief have a great relationship where his crew chief talks him down off the ledge if he gets worked up about something. He's a great leader. And then you have a spotter who's watching the race occur. And a spotter is kind of like an offensive coordinator for a football analogy, right? Where the where he's an offensive and defensive coordinator, where he's telling him where to go on the track, where the cars are seeming fast, or
Oh,
how to put
all in
defense.
real time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I just say,
No, yeah.
So you're driving out there, you're dealing with all the elements, and you've got this person telling you real time, like go on this side of the track versus that side of the track.
Yep. You know, like or like, hey, you have a car trying to make a pass on your right side, take his air away from him. You know, you're gonna want to run down the low side, take his air away again. You know, and he's giving you a play by play in your mind of how everything's unfolding around you.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, the other analogy I think about is the like the cycling. And, I've always thought to myself, as an outsider looking in, it looks like a bunch of grown men riding bicycles, but there's so much incredible, like minute detail technique that goes into that. And when you mentioned about taking somebody's air out and things like that, these are things that if I were to watch a NASCAR race, it'd be invisible to me. I would just see cars going really, really fast, but there's just like an incredible amount of strategy, technique, physics that goes into like every single move that you're making, all while trying to like control all the elements that you possibly have like some control over, right?
The best explanation is like I'm on the brink of losing control every single lap. That's where I'm gonna be the fastest,
Oh,
is
yeah.
on the brink of losing control for 200 laps,
Wow.
right? So having consistency every single lap, and that's something sometimes I struggle with. Sometimes like if I get a little out of control, I'm gonna be reserved for the next 5 laps to gain that confidence back.
Sure.
And it's that ability to like snap back into it and go back out there and risk it all. Because I had a tough year a couple years ago where I had to work with a performance coach because I crashed right off the gate at Daytona and I crashed again at Las Vegas, and that killed my confidence for a little while.
Oh, I could totally see that. Yeah, I mean, you get shaken, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And then the big analogy is like a skier like going through the woods, right? You're not focusing on the trees, you're focusing on the path forward. So, prior to going to a race and saying, no, I'm not gonna crash, I'm not gonna crash. It's like I need to change that mentality and that strategy and mindset.
well, yeah, totally. Yeah, and so obviously, like, and tons of psychology go into this because you mentioned that you've always loved speed, and the motivation here is to go fast, but you're going at such blinding fast speeds that psychology must play a huge factor in this, right? There's like very little room for error, and you've got to be able to control the elements, but also your physiology and your psychology and your emotions while you're doing this.
Yeah, so and again, like so what I struggled with going from racing locally to racing on a national scale into NASCAR was the heat. I wasn't prepared for the heat, and so like that would affect my mind, right? Overheating,
Oh yeah.
just like, and then the mental exhaustion that would come from the overheating. So, just doing a lot of sauna work to get ready for these like 2.5, 3 hour races, and like I had a race in Texas a couple years ago where inside the car was 130 degrees. So, for
Wow.
2.5 hours, which is no joke.
That's
Just be
insane.
or having, again, like being a lower funded guy, I didn't have a cool suit like the other drivers did. And so saving my pennies up for a cool suit and being able to have that and again change my performance because I had the ability to go out and get that and stay cool throughout the race.
Wow, it's um yeah, it's incredible. I mean, again, back to just the conditioning and the preparation and the innovation. Um, is there y- going back to tennis, physical preparedness has changed dramatically over the last 20 years for tennis, where before it was like, you were in physical shape to play a match. Now, you have to be able to just go from the baseline to the net in a fraction of a second and do that for 5 sets straight. Because if you can't do that without losing a beat, you're going to lose because the guy who you're playing against can do that. And so the physical training is exceptional. Is it the same way when it comes to like, the physical training for NASCAR? Because like you said, you got to endure like hundreds of miles in blistering heat driving these cars, which aren't like power steering, right? There's an enormous
Yeah.
amount of physical and mental preparedness that goes into this.
Yeah. I think if you look at the drivers from like 10 years ago, it's definitely changed to a more fit, more in shape driver for now.
Yeah.
You know,
And
things
and
get
you
better, more data, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you as a driver, I mean, it's, obviously the physique and the skills. I believe you also have a degree in mechanical engineering, right?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. I haven't really used that much. I put a show car in in one of my sponsors' buildings, and I had to draw out a free body diagram, for weight distribution, and then the structural engineer kinda laughed at that. He was like, "This is a joke," and I was like, "Oh, this is the best I can do," you know? I have a degree, believe me.
All right. Well, that nullifies my next question because I was going to ask you about that because, with your technical lens, does that change the way you think about innovation strategy when you're inside the cockpit?
I try to leave that up to the team. I'm a artsy engineer, right? Where, like, I kinda go by feel, and I go by feel in the seat, and that's kinda what you have to go by from my standpoint, right? Like, how I approach race weekend and how I approach the car, and gotta go by vibes and feel and stuff, and I know maybe that's a poor aspect to look at, but I try not to get hung up on the engineering aspect of racing, which is weird because I do love to work on things and design things, but that's how I approach it.
Yeah. Um, when we talk about the innovation, again, we talked about kind of like the aerodynamics, uh, you know, the motor and how you develop the technology that you're driving. Now there is an enormous amount of data, which also manifests itself into like wind patterns and how you do that. And then with an emergence of like tons of data, now there's like AI. To
Mm.
what extent has AI kind of infiltrated the field, or at what levels is it being used, if at all, or big data generally?
You know, I'm not too privy on what the big teams are using. What I can extrapolate is that they're probably gonna use it to sort through data faster,
Mm.
and make better judgment calls throughout the course of a race. So, throughout the course of the race, all the data that they're getting, lap times, um, tire temperatures, tire wear, they're gonna be able to make adjustments to the car throughout the race and make those quicker and make just better judgment calls throughout the race. Is what's probably gonna happen in the next year to 2 years.
Interesting. Yeah, and do that in real time, as you're getting all that data, being able to make like split-second decisions in the moment.
Yeah, so, like, the big adjustments we can't really make many adjustments in the car as far as, like we make brake bias, adjustments, but, like, um, when we come in for pit stops, tire pressure adjustments, track bar adjustments, where how the car is like, the attitude of the car from
Mhm.
the rear, um, they can make those adjustments, probably a little better with using AI.
Do you think there would be a moment where like some of the human element of these races starts becoming replaced? Because you mentioned before you have teams. So you're in the race, you're driving, you've got a coach that's saying, take this guy's wind out, go on this side of the track and all that stuff because they're watching from a different angle. They're seeing things that you don't see.
Yeah.
Now imagine you have a camera out there with an AI agent that's doing all that, taking in all the data, and I can tell you specifically the optimal way for you to drive your car. Like, is that where you think the field is going, or do you think there'll be constraints to tell you how much you can and can't use technology?
See, that's I don't think NASCAR is that innovative where they're gonna do that yet. Maybe 5 years down the road. I think that's a great idea though, Nick. Like, that's not a bad idea because like, they can go without judgment, right? The human judgment factor. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if we're that innovative, but I definitely think if, like, technology is there that could be useful, I think that, like, wouldn't be a detriment by any means.
Because I mean, that would also not only be able to process the data that you just mentioned much faster. It would be instant. It would be real time and it would get to you faster because now there wouldn't be a lag in communication, right? Because the lag in communication is a real person capturing this information, processing it, and then getting on the speaker and saying, like, hey, CJ, do XYZ. All that would just instantly come to your helmet and you'd hear it and know exactly what to do.
Mm.
Um, all while you're driving the car so that human element lag would just kind of go away
Yeah.
for optimal decision making.
Yeah, but there still is human error with the driver,
Oh,
right?
for
So,
sure.
like,
Yeah.
as a driver, you can still make it just like a bad call or not trust the AI,
Mhm.
that could be making that call to you, or, like, just a mechanical failure that could, of course, a flat tire, a blown engine, things like that that could happen throughout the race that could change it up, but, yeah, I definitely don't think that's a bad idea by any means.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems entirely doable. I mean, other fields are doing it, whether in healthcare or other areas. It doesn't seem like something that, put it this way, it doesn't sound like science fiction anymore. I think,
Right,
a handful of really competent engineers might be able to prototype that pretty quickly.
right.
Um, Do you think that, I mean, if we do project forward where that technology becomes real and all the drivers are using this, all the teams are using this, is there a risk? And then all the cars are almost identical. Like you said, they're kind of like one car to the next one are pretty much the same from a layperson's perspective. Um, is there a risk that these things become a little bit too predictable, where everybody kind of is like operating with the same data, same technology?
Well, that's my frustration with the limitations that NASCAR has put on these cars. That um, kind of where the teams unload at throughout practice and qualifying is where they end up at during the race. So there, it limits the passing and the racing that occurs, and that you don't really have much of a roll of the dice throughout race weekend. You know,
Yeah, yeah, it becomes very calculated.
it becomes very follow the leader at that aspect.
Yeah. So from that perspective, then, if we think about just competition in general, what creates, well, first of all, before we get to that, what determines whether you win or lose a race? Is it, I mean, I'm sure there's some luck to it, like the right opportunity you seize upon it. Um, the technology for the most part is, similar because it's constrained. There's obviously elements about how much you practice versus how much you didn't practice. Do those things factor in very heavily to make it for someone like you that doesn't have like unlimited practice time? How much of a handicap is that for you in real race time environment? Like, do you have the capability of winning in those environments or
I have the capability of winning at certain tracks, like Daytona and Talladega are like level sets for fields, right? Where it's you're playing chess throughout the whole race, and it's about being at the right place at the right time, making sure to avoid the crashes and to be there at the end. Mile and a half tracks like Charlotte, it's a huge detriment. Handling comes into a huge play there. Short tracks, or maybe even road courses. Sometimes if I have experience on road courses, which I don't. But you can see in the past where road course people who are really apt to racing road courses. For example, Shane Van Gisbergen, who was from Australia, he came over and won his first race, being his first time in a car, and didn't get much practice. So that was a true testament to his racing abilities. But yeah, at the majority of tracks, it is a huge handicap for most drivers and teams that are not get the practice that they truly need.
that makes sense? But like you said, some tracks are engineered to level set and kind of even out the playing field, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Hmm, interesting. And so then, do you tend to focus more on the ones that even the playing field? Because otherwise, why go to the ones where like the odds are stacked against you?
Yeah. So like with my scenario of having to raise funds to go racing, the races I try to essentially sell is Daytona and Talladega. Um, but if I was racing for a championship, you have to attend all the races, right? And compete in all the races.
That makes sense. Yeah, okay. Is there a qualification? I mean, there must be a qualification. So you have to go to the smaller races to qualify for the bigger ones?
No, essentially, it's just a schedule basis where you have to qualify each race. So they'll
Nice.
have a practice session and the qualifying session, and they take the top 35 cars.
Okay. And so, if we okay, so let's talk about um the where the playing field is even, and so anybody stands a chance at winning, then how do you convert like a single win into something that's sustainable or a sustainable advantage over a period of time? Is there such a thing, or is it like as soon as you have that advantage, the whole field catches up?
So if you were to win at Daytona, the only advantage you would have is a points buffer and some monetary funds that come into the race. Like if I was the lowest tier team and I won Daytona, and so let's say I just had a sponsor for Daytona, like there would be an opportunity to convince them to come back. It's like, hey guys, we just won. Don't you want to do that again? Um, but from like an engineering standpoint, there's no real benefit, you know.
Mm, okay. Now, if we shift courses and we think about like the evolution of the sport itself, and we talked a little bit before how it's been evolving over time, and you just mentioned like street courses and so on, which I think are been very popular in Formula One as
Yeah.
well. Is that primarily driven by like fan psychology and what they want to see? Like what's actually pushing the field towards, away from the track and other
Yeah,
scenarios?
that's like what I do applaud NASCAR in doing is that we've kind of changed it up. Like recently, we had a road race in Chicago. That was just a whole new thing and a different. It felt like a whole event, as opposed to just a race. And now this year they're going to the naval base in Coronado, in San Diego, and I think that's just gonna be it's gonna be on Father's Day weekend. It's gonna be a huge event, and I like that they're doing it. They're just changing it up, seeing what else works with the racing. And just um, here's another aspect to NASCAR, not just going around in circles.
How do the purists feel about that?
Um, I think some people were closed minded, some people were open to it. It's just I think the race in Chicago is just a whole new demographic for sponsors that want to be involved.
Hmm. Um, I mean, it sounds like an enormous amount of fun. Do you have a favorite race? Is it Daytona? You've mentioned it a few times.
Daytona's definitely yeah, Daytona's up there. Daytona, I've crashed like each Daytona race I've been.
Yeah, really? Oh man,
Yeah,
erase that. We'll delete that from the recording.
yeah. No, we can keep it in there. There's some good highlights of me on YouTube.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
Daytona's a tough one, but I love it. And then Bristol's a really tough, vigorous racetrack. The lap times there are around 16 seconds, so it's really fast paced. We're going 130 miles an hour, but it's a half mile, so it's things happen very fast there.
So that's interesting. Actually, you mentioned if we do unpack that, well, you say you crash Daytona every time you've been there. Why is that? Is it because like you have like everybody's just pushing it to the limit? Is it because there's more drivers or people are more careless or what is it that causes you to crash more at Daytona versus other places?
Um, Me personally, I don't know, man. It's just something I have with the track. I think it's the first race of the year. Everyone wants to win. So like if my dad was driving in front of me, I would crash him to win, right? If I was in second and he was coming to the finish line. So whatever it takes in that for that mentality. But yeah, I just have a thing with Daytona.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we talked a little bit before the recording about you being originally from Massachusetts, right? You're living in
Yeah.
Framingham.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned there's a race in Chicago. Any up here in like the New England area that you
Yep,
come
there's
to?
New Hampshire. There's New Hampshire Motor Speedway up in Concord, New Hampshire, just north of Concord. That's pretty much it. And then Watkins Glen, and then Dover, Delaware is the other closest racetrack to us in New England. But there's a lot of small tracks. So like there's Star Speedway in Epping, there's Hudson Speedway in Hudson, New Hampshire. There's a bunch of racetracks in Maine, a couple in Vermont. There's Seekonk Speedway down in Massachusetts.
Hmm,
And then Thompson has a couple of great racetracks. Connecticut has a couple of great racetracks. Stafford Springs and Thompson, Connecticut.
okay.
So
Um,
there's a lot of local short track racing that occurs in New England.
when you say short track racing, you mean like
That's
so?
like that's like the stepping stone to get into NASCAR
Oh,
is like racing at a local level. Um, it's essentially like the Providence Bruins in a way.
okay, interesting.
Kiwi hockey.
Yeah. Um, And so obviously the industry and the field itself is evolving. We talked a little bit of how, introducing road races and other things. How do you see the field taking shape over the next like 5 or 10 years? What's the trajectory you're seeing as far as like technology and constraints and money, fields, road races and so on? Like what can we anticipate, or in your perspective, what do you anticipate NASCAR looking like in, let's say, 5 years?
So the Cup Series has gone to pretty much a spec car. I'm hoping that they keep the series that I run in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series the same way it is with having a naturally aspirated motor. So the Cup Series has a fuel injected motor. We have a naturally aspirated. It's kind of like old school in a sense, because no, current cars run naturally aspirated. No, there's not many carbureted cars on the road these days. So it's more of a purist sense, and I hope they don't go away from that because like we do have some of the best racing that occurs. Um, I, I'm not sure. I think we're at a pivotal point with NASCAR and their leadership team, with the lawsuit that just occurred, and I'm not sure where we go from here. I hope we go away from certain things as far as like a one lug tire, because as you assimilate NASCAR to real life, there's no car on the road that has a one lug tire,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
you know? So I like our series pit stops that have 5 lugs, and the tire changer has to hit those 5 lugs in 12 to 13 seconds. Um, I think it's just cool. It's just different, you know?
I mean, it
So
definitely adds
I'm
an
not sure
element.
where we're at.
Yeah,
Not
it
sure where
definitely
we're at.
adds an element of excitement.
Yeah,
Is the guy gonna, mess up, or is he gonna get them all in the exact 5 seconds he has time to do each tire or whatever to get that car out of there?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, no, it's interesting to see how it's evolving, and yeah, and you have played obviously like being in the field for something that for most of us looks like a black box. Or what are the kind of things that you, having now lived this world, wish that more people were aware of? Like, what are the kind of things you're like, whether it be behind the scenes or, your love for the sport or, what is it, anything that you think more people should be aware of when it comes to NASCAR?
I think from a business standpoint, how valuable, like, going to the races is with your clients, right? But, of course, I'm just looking for more sponsors. I think it's truly valuable. I think, what's amazing is, like, the camaraderie and things that go on, and um, how exciting it is to go to a racetrack and feel those cars go by you at 200 miles an hour. It's amazing. It's a great experience to be there live. I think I wish more people got to experience that and weren't closed off to um, seeing that.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah, I have been to some when I was a little kid. I remember going to some race cars and some races, and yeah, it's hard to express or explain the feeling when those cars are approaching. You feel that Doppler effect just approaching you and passing you. It's so much more than sound. I mean, it's like almost terrifying how much it shakes you to your core.
Yeah, right, right. So,
Yeah. Um, so now if we take a step and just zoom out and just think about, um, your career in general, and obviously you're still very much building it. So we're not talking anytime in the near future, but if you can like project forward into say 10, 20 years, whatever that course would look like, and you look over your body of work, what would be the best case scenario that would make you feel that you've achieved the fullest impact that you were capable of and really gives you the most fulfillment over what you've accomplished over your career?
yeah, so I've struggled with raising funds to go like race full time, and so like that's the near goal future. Um, I started coaching this younger kid, and that's actually brought me a lot of enjoyment. And that's something I wasn't expecting, is coaching him and all the mistakes I made along the way. And that was kind of interesting. So maybe do a little bit more of that, you know, the
Yeah.
coaching aspect and seeing how not to screw up.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely meritorious, and I hear a lot of people they get a lot of fulfillment from just coaching and teaching. Yeah,
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea I had that. And maybe, maybe I wasn't the best coach the first time around, but like, learned a lot. It was so funny. Like I would drill into him all the stuff that he needed to do, and I like would look back and I'd be like, I need to do this stuff too, you know?
yeah.
I
It's
need to
funny how
practice
that
all that
works.
fusion.
Funny how that works, right? Where you like, as you're teaching, you start learning yourself because you're like, oh, wait a second, I make the same mistake that you make.
Yep. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Well, CJ, this has been extraordinary. Thank you so much for this conversation. I mean, for me, it was all brand new, so it's super interesting, which is the whole reason why I do this podcast in the first place. And again, thank you for your time. Pleasure to meet you. And I'm going to have to look up some of these races and hopefully try to come to one of the ones that you're racing in and cheer you on.
For sure, Nick. Thank you.
That was CJ McLaughlin. And now, unnatural signals.
As we see in startups, sometimes the biggest constraints can drive the biggest innovations. These are the signals that we picked up from our conversation with CJ. Number one, innovation doesn't disappear, it migrates. When one avenue of innovation closes, another opens. In NASCAR, standardized cars didn't eliminate innovation. They pushed it into aerodynamics, simulation, race strategy, psychology, pit stops, and execution. The same pattern plays out everywhere. When products become commodities, innovation migrates to experience. When AI becomes ubiquitous, innovation migrates to workflows. When technology equalizes, competitive advantage moves somewhere else. Innovation never disappears, it simply finds a new battlefield. Number two, constraints relocate competition. Most leaders think fewer constraints create more competition. Often the opposite is true. Rules don't eliminate competition,
they change where competition happens. NASCAR standardizes the cars. Teams responded by competing harder in data, simulation, teamwork, preparation, and race strategy. Every industry follows this pattern. When one dimension becomes standardized, competition migrates to the next one. Number 3, equal rules don't create equal competition. Cost controls don't always level the playing field. Sometimes they widen it. When NASCAR reduced practice time to save money, large teams simply shifted practice into sophisticated simulators. Smaller teams couldn't. The rule was identical. The advantage wasn't. Whenever leaders introduce a new policy, they should ask, who gains the most from this constraint? Number 4, when technology converges, humans become the advantage. As technology becomes more standardized, people become more differentiated. The deciding factor becomes judgment, resilience, teamwork, leadership, communication, calm under pressure. Eventually, every mature industry reaches the same destination. Competitive advantage shifts from better technology to better people. And finally, performance lives at the edge of control. CJ described elite racing as operating on the brink of losing control every single lap. That's true far beyond motorsports. Championship teams, elite athletes, great entrepreneurs, military special operators, world-class surgeons. None perform conservatively. They learn to operate at the edge of stability, where risk is high enough to create extraordinary performance, but not so high that control is lost. Peak performance isn't found inside the comfort zone, it's found at the edge of control. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to UnNatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.